have we misunderstood chaos magic almost since the very beginning. We tend to think of it as radical and modern and experimental and as detached from society and as against tradition, but is it in fact a kind of perennial tradition or a kind of traditionalism? I'm Angel Miller. I'm the author of The Three Stages of Initiatic Spirituality and the Path of the Warrior Mystic, Being a Man in an Age of Chaos, and the upcoming Transcend the Chaos, which will be published in October of this year, 2025. And stay to the end because we are going to explore the most fundamental mistake of chaos magic. Now, what is a perennial tradition, or what is traditionalism? Well, it was created or invented, or I suppose one might even argue discovered or rediscovered by the French metaphysician René Guénon, who died in 1951, having converted to, or more accurately, moved into Islam and moving to Egypt to live as a life as a Sufi. Traditionalism is, despite what people think, it is influenced by the late 19th century philosophy of Theosophy, founded by Madame Blavatsky, which tried to draw all of the world's traditions together to show that there was some kind of primordial tradition. Guénon and traditionalists differ and dislike and argue with Theosophy for one specific reason, and that is that they believe this primordial tradition has splintered into the different major world religions: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, of course, maybe Buddhism, possibly Hinduism, etc. And one can only practice this primordial or perennial tradition if one joins one of those religions. Of course, what makes the traditionalists differ from the average believer in any of these religions is that they would know that no, it's not the ultimate faith. No, it's not the only revelation from God. It's merely a sort of museum piece left over from the original revelation that occurred allegedly thousands and thousands of years ago. But in great and very clear distinction to chaos magic, traditionalists believe that the major religions, should be practiced and that they should be preserved as if in amber, not progressing in any way. So we should go back to painting icons in Christianity, or we should go back further if we can, and we should not move forward with it anyway. We should just keep practicing these old practices and never ever move forward. Hence Guénon converting to Sufism, dressing like a Muslim, moving to Egypt, and effectively living in a way that one could have lived 500 or 1,000 years ago. Now, traditionalism is a somewhat controversial, mystical, spiritual philosophy, often associated with, or at least at one point, with right-wing politics. That's an oversimplification, and comes from the fact that one of its greatest adherents and promoters was Julius Evola, who certainly was on the right. However, it's like everything else, it's complicated. King Charles of Great Britain, formerly Prince Charles, when he was a prince and not the king at least, was a great advocate of traditionalism and spoke at traditionalist conferences and wrote in traditionalist journals, and his book on spirituality and nature is infused and filled with traditionalist writers and ideas. And he, of course, is seen, or has generally been seen throughout the decades, as being rather left-wing, rather politically correct, and one of the first people to really promote environmentalism as well, when it was regarded as a bit silly by mainstream society. So what makes chaos magic a kind of traditionalism? Well, things are complicated, and we love to make things simple. And of course, to express an idea, sometimes we have to boil it down to its simplest form. But we should also recognize that actually things are much more complicated and things connect in different ways that we don't always like to imagine, or that there's some underlying ideas which maybe don't fit with our conception of it. Probably the best example of this is the beat poets of the 1950s, extremely radical and revolutionary and promoting, sort of free sex and alcohol and drug use and dropping out of society, complete radicals and anarchic, and no one would think that they are right wing, and yet they were influenced, in fact, very, very strongly influenced by the work of Oswald Spengler, a member of the conservative revolution of the early 20th century Germany, when things really were conservative. They believed, like Oswald Spengler, that the West was in decline. And of course, some people's response to a declining West would be to join a religion, maybe to convert to Catholicism and to try and promote ancient or traditional or classical European values and culture and aesthetics. Their response was to drop out from the West, drop out from the 1950s man with his, with his car and his 9 to 5 and patriotism and this kind of thing. Very much a response to not only modern technology, but also to a war which left Europe devastated, but certainly Europe and European culture. If we read the seminal works of chaos magic, I think thinking particularly of Liber Null and Psychonaut, there is, and I think this has been forgotten, a kind of pessimism in there, a kind of conservatism, almost a kind of radical conservatism, maybe of the sort of Beat Generation type, in a way. To quote from Liber Null and Psychonaut, Peter J. Carroll says this about our future, which is, of course, emerging now, decades later. He says, quote, "Fixed ideas about the essential spirit or nature of man will be completely abandoned as an emotional technology becomes more refined. Drugs, obscure sexualities, faddism, strange entertainments, and material sensationalism are a preliminary groping towards this end. Chemicals, electronics, and surgery will only tend to enslave. Gnosis, the alphabet of desire, and other magical methods tend to liberate," unquote. Well, if you're enjoying this content, do like and subscribe. And if you think you have some friends that might appreciate this or might cause them to think a little bit and they might get something out of it, obviously please share the video as well. I appreciate it. Now, I think what's interesting about that statement in Liber Non Psychonaut is that we would instinctively tend to think that Carroll would side with obscure sexualities and drugs and faddism, and I think that would be much more associated with, for example, the Illuminus of Thanatos and chaos magic. Even the main or one of the major methods of activating a sigil or symbol to influence the environment outside of the magician, to mold it to his or her will, is of course the use of sexuality or sexual energy. And yet here he is saying that we must liberate ourselves from these things through the use of magic, as if magic is a way of checking out of modernity, as if it's modernity is a kind of screen, a kind of illusion, as Guy Debord would say, a left-wing thinker, of course. Now, in the recent book, a collection of essays entitled This is Chaos, which Peter Carroll edited, there's a particularly interesting comment by Julian Vane, who sits on the board of the Journal of Psychedelic Studies and is an author and is a visiting professor at many British universities. Now, in his essay or chapter, Chemionosis Redux, he says the following. He says that chaos magic can be characterized, quote, as having modernist or even perennialist tendencies, unquote. So here we have this word that we used earlier, perennial tradition, perennialism, or here perennialist tendencies. Now, why is that? Well, he goes on to say that, quote, while magic may come clothed in a multiplicity of cultural costumes, it operates through identifiable core principles and processes, many of which are rooted in common biology. Changing one's breathing is an example he gives, and he mentions Hindu mantras and Anglican hymns, Anglican Christianity. But clearly what he is saying is there is something underlying all of these things, even if it's Anglican Christianity or Hinduism or Tantra or whatever it may be, and that chaos magic gets us back to this kind of perennialism where it strips away the veneer and is just about, in a sense, just about the techniques. And these techniques can be found all over the world, especially the capacity or the desire to enter a state of gnosis or trance, that this is something that we also find across the globe. And as such, even though chaos magic looks radical and dangerous and, punk rock, at the same time, by stripping away everything, rather like the beat poets, perhaps stripping away the sort of simulacra of a man in the sort of 1950s man, kind of posing as a kind of traditional man, but not really. Stripping away this sort of faux tradition that one can get back to this perennial tradition that we can find across the globe at some point or another, and maybe even a part of our own biology, sort of embedded in us, a part of us. Well, there's another interesting quote in the same book, and that is by Sandra Default. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He is the host of the Order of Chaos podcast. And he talks about the necessity of belief in chaos magic and about chaos magic kind of revealing something to him in relation to belief. And of course, let's just put ourselves in the mind of someone who's maybe got into magic, maybe not that long ago, and we can see, or we do see when we join, maybe someone is praying to the horn god of Wicca, and they're getting what they want, or seemingly getting what they want, or claiming that they are getting what they are doing magic for, and somebody else, a Thelemite maybe, is praying to Nuit, and lo and behold, they're also getting what they are asking for. Well, is it that these deities are real and there's just lots and lots of them, or is there something underlying? Is there a perennial tradition where we're all actually praying to the same being, or is it something else? Well, Default has this to say. He says, quote, I knew that the religious debate was a farce, and that if magic or prayer worked, it worked, period. And if this is the case, that means there must be one underlying thread that ties all of these systems of magic and religion together. It makes perfect sense that this thread is belief itself. So the idea that there is a thread tying all of these systems of magic and religion together is perennialism, basically. He claims or suggests that what is tying them together is belief. Now, there is a problem. I said at the beginning we were going to explore the most fundamental problem of chaos magic. And I think this quote, I'm not criticizing the thinking, but I think it illuminates this particular problem, which maybe has not been illuminated before. Chaos magic believes that belief is a tool and places a great deal of emphasis on belief. And it may be that this is in a sense, a sort of historical hangover from our tradition of Christianity in particular for the last 1,000 years approximately, depending where we are. Let's in the West, of course, where I think most people are watching from. And it's a problem because, no, it doesn't really apply to all systems of magic and religion. Most obviously, of course, it doesn't apply to Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism or Zen is not about belief. In a certain sense, it's about not believing, right? So that you may be a banker, or you may be a road sweeper, but you go to the Zen temple, you leave all that behind, and you're not praying to Buddha as if, oh, the Buddha is a god who's going to bestow these gifts on me. You're trying to reach Buddha nature. You're trying to become a Buddha yourself. So it's not about believing in the Buddha. It's about becoming or being. And the Buddha isn't, as I say, it's not really a god in the same way that the Buddha might be in Tibetan Buddhism or Kali or the god of Christianity, for example. But there's something deeper than that, at least historically speaking, and that is, even in European the tradition, which by extension becomes Western tradition, belief is not always important, even within religion and magic. And yes, today, of course, we talk about orthodoxy and having orthodox beliefs, and it's very, very important that we believe the right things. It was very, very important that we believe the right things in religion, and now it's very, very important that we believe the right things in politics. So belief is a huge deal for the West, and in America I think it might even be a bigger deal than other Western countries, and largely because it cultivated this movement of positive thinking, or mind metaphysics as it's always also called. And what is mind metaphysics? What is positive thinking? Is it just thinking positive thoughts? It is the idea that thinking certain things or imagining certain things, these things will happen, or believing certain things, that these things will happen. And if I believe them strongly enough, they definitely will happen. So if they don't, it's not a problem of what I'm doing in the world, it's not a problem of society, it's not a problem of me, it's not a problem of my actions, it's a problem of my beliefs. I just didn't believe strongly enough. Now, I would say that's largely nonsense, and chaos, which we are talking about, in a sense shows it to be nonsense. Things come up, things go down, there's a constant change, and we've all experienced disappointment, we've all experienced surprise, we've all experienced shock. We can only experience those things if we really believe that something was going to happen and it didn't, or we really believe that something wasn't going to happen and it did. So belief itself is not enough. And in fact, one of the ways we grow in life and become wiser, we become more ourselves, we act more authentically, is by our beliefs being proven wrong. We think something will happen, it doesn't. We believe something, we're shown that it's false. We don't believe something, we're shown that it's true. But returning to European, or by extension Western tradition, if we go back to ancient Greece, orthodoxy wasn't an issue. What you believed is what you believed. You could be an atheist in ancient Greek society, where obviously there was rituals to the gods, praying to the gods, statues of the gods in your house, household deities, mystery traditions, which you would enter and go through these secret rituals to the gods, etc. Orthodoxy wasn't important. What was important is orthopraxy. That is, you had to practice the rituals. You had to go through the mysteries, you had to go through the rituals of the mysteries. The mysteries and the rituals were the same gods in them. You had to pray to the same gods, even outside of the mysteries. You had to do. You could think whatever you like. You could be an atheist and still go through the mysteries. You could be an atheist, but you still had to pray to the gods. You had to go to the public rituals to the gods. You had to go to the temple. Orthodoxy didn't matter. Orthopraxy, what you did, mattered. Doing the right thing mattered. So if chaos magic tells us that belief is a tool, the ancient Greeks, and I would suggest maybe ancient peoples a little more widely would tell us that belief may be a tool, but so is doing. Doing the ritual is a tool. Going through the rituals of the mysteries is a tool. Praying to the gods is a tool, whether you think they're real or not real. Not belief as a tool, doing as a tool. And of course, the more we do, the more things start to change, and then maybe our beliefs will change as well. Well, to sum up why chaos magic alludes to a kind of perennial tradition, we've seen that that is in fact a kind of resistance to the worst of modernity, the fads, the strangeness, and it is instead using magic to get back to something authentic, maybe even something perennial or primordial, stripping away the veneer, the illusion, as Guy Debord would call it, of modernity. We've seen that, according to Julian Vane, there is this perennialist tendency within chaos magic, using these techniques, and in particular using gnosis, entering trance, altered states of consciousness, which we can find across the globe. So it's kind of in a sense, a kind of radical perennialism, where we are embodying these ancient techniques, these ancient states of mind that we find everywhere throughout history and throughout time and throughout space on our planet. And of course, we also are told that belief is the thread that joins all of these things together. I might think that belief doesn't join all of these things together, but nevertheless, there is an acknowledgement that there is a thread, whatever that thread may be. It may not be belief, it might be actually doing something, performing the rituals. Orthopraxy might be what actually joins these things together, at least on a sort of superficial human level. Of course, people might say that their deities are real and representative of the same forces or similar forces in different cultures. Well, thanks very much. Check out chaostransform.com, or if you want to learn more about me, you can go to angelmillar.com. And I've also been talking with Lua Valentia every week about chaos magic, so check out the channel Lucid Alchemy. I'll leave a link below. Thanks very much.